This video introduces you to the guitar amplification and effects modeling concepts employed by Fractal Audio Systems. It's intended for people that have no or perhaps little experience with Fractal products, but are familiar with the basic of equipment that's involved in the world of electric guitar music. We'll use the Fractal Audio Systems FM9 floor modeler to present the basic concepts. The concepts discussed here can be applied to other Fractal products as well. We'll focus more on the organization of the software that comes with the Fractal modeler and acts as your user interface, rather than the physical product features such as display panel, knobs, buttons, I/O jacks, and so on. The concepts that we'll touch on in this video include the basics of the FM9 editing software, which is called FM9 Edit. And those basics include presets, effects blocks, signal routing, scenes, and channels. In a typical electric guitarist equipment, you'll find a guitar, an amplifier, including some kind of speaker and cabinet, often some effects, which might be floor pedals or rack mounted, some cables to connect everything together, and there'll often be one or more microphones involved when either recording the guitar or performing live. FM9 provides most of these ingredients within its feature set. So does the Fractal FM3. The flagship AXFX 3, which is a rack-mounted device, provides the same functionality when used in conjunction with a foot controller unit such as the FC6 or the FC12. These Fractal modelers include many models of amplifiers, speakers, and cabinets and effects. The speaker cab simulations employ specific microphones too, and you'll use virtual cabling to hook all these components together. Let's get into talking about presets. As an electric guitarist, you'll typically bring a subset of your equipment to a gig or recording session. That group of equipment that you plan to use is your rig, right? You can think of a preset as your rig. Just as you can own enough equipment for multiple rigs, the FM9 enables you to create and employ many presets. You can create hundreds of presets combining a huge selection of amp models, speakers, cabs, and so on. The FM9 comes with a couple of hundred ready-to-use built-in presets, which will enable you to produce a huge variety of sounds covering a diverse set of musical styles. You can use these built-in presets as is, or you can customize them and save them into new memory locations where they can be easily recalled later. In the real world, you may be very focused on playing one kind of musical genre. In that case, you probably just need one or two rigs or presets designed to provide you with the sounds that you need to cover that genre of music. If you're the kind of player who's not focused on one sort of sound, you probably wind up using at least a few different presets with different combinations of amps and effects and so on. And of course, some folks, given unlimited space and budgets and musical interests, might be inclined to build many different rigs that could cover a wide variety of different forms of music and playing styles. Your inclinations along these lines are going to dictate what kind of presets you want to use or create in your FM9. Let's dive into one of the built-in presets, the first preset, which is named 59 Bass Guy. Using this example, we'll begin to learn about the software that's used to create and edit presets. Note that you can use the physical interface on the FM9 itself to do this, in other words, the buttons and knobs and so on, but the software that Fractal provides, FM9 Edit, really makes this job a lot easier conceptually and physically. FM9 Edit is provided free of charge from Fractal Audio Systems. Other Fractal modelers, like the FM3, have their own editors. FM9 Edit is used to review, analyze, modify, create, and manage presets, and do all the other sorts of things that you need to do with the modeler. I've provided a link to download the software in the description of this video. You must install the software on your computer and use a USB cable to connect it to your Fractal modeler. The changes that you make in the software are used to instantly update the preset that you're working on in the modeler, and vice versa. Changes that you make must be saved if you want to keep them, or if you want to discard them, you can simply move to a different preset without saving. Let's identify some of the main components in FM9 Edit. Looking over here in the upper left corner, you'll see the connected indicator lights up when the USB cable is properly connected and everything has been configured properly. If you don't see this, then something's wrong and you need to review how your connections are set up. As with most apps, the menu above provides access to the major functions in the software. Okay, and over to the right, you'll note this meter CPU. This depicts how much the FM9's processing power is being utilized by your current preset. Keep your eye on this, because while the FM9's power is quite impressive, it isn't endless. In other words, there are some practical limits as to how much stuff you can cram into one preset or how complex you can make it. So in the center below the menu, you'll find these two display panels. The upper one identifies the preset you're currently working on, and the lower one identifies the scene. You can have up to 8 scenes in a preset, and there's always one by default. Okay, we're going to get into scenes a little bit further into the video. These buttons over here on the right, or over to the left I should say, are used to change presets, incrementing them or decrementing them. Okay, this is how you do it through FM9 Edit. Of course, there are also ways to accomplish the same things by using the physical interface on the FM9, as you can see depicted here. We're not going to get into that discussion in this video. This video is really focused on how you do stuff with FM9 Edit. If you click this button here, you can see all of the presets that have been built into the FM9. These are there when you buy it and open it up. There are 383 of the built-in templates, 384 if you include bypass. Now, these other presets over here are ones that I've created on my own. Okay, those are just empty memory locations that you can use to save your own presets. Now, if you look at the names of these presets, you'll note that many of them are kind of generic, and that they seem to be referring to amp models. Okay, there's no law or rule that says that your presets need to be named after amp models. That's just a convention that the people that designed these early built-in presets used. So as you can guess, this preset that we're going to be working on, 59 Bass Guy, that's modeled after, or that's based around the 59 Fender Bassman amp. This one's built around a 1965 Fender Bassman amp. This is built around the Fender Vibrolux Reverb, Deluxe Reverb, and so on. You can kind of guess what the names of the amp models are, and you can tell what the clip is going to, or what the preset is going to be about, because the preset has been named related to the amp model. Now, the reason that Fractal designers didn't use the actual names like Fender Bassman or Vox AC30 and so on is out of concern for trademark or copyright infringement. So they use names that are similar. This preset that we're looking at, 59 Bass Guy, is built on the 59 Bass Guy Bright model. Okay, you can see that there are 3 models, 8, 9, and 10. There are 3 different amp models related to the 1959 Fender Bassman. Each one identifies a particular input configuration. So this one is like being plugged into the bright channel. This one's like being plugged into the normal channel. This one's like being plugged into both channels jumpered. You can tell that that's how Fractal models the notion of using different channels on a particular amp. There's actually different models that they've created to reflect the different channels. This particular preset contains a drive pedal as well, a model of a drive pedal, and you can see that same kind of naming situation going on here, where this particular pedal, Bender Fuzz, as you might guess, that's based off of an actual Vox tone bender. I'd also like to point out that as it's not always 100% clear what a particular fractal model corresponds to in the real world, there's a fractal user named Yek, Y-E-K, who's created a couple of different guidebooks that tell you which drive pedal or which amplifier model a particular one is actually based on in the real world. So I've provided links in the description of this video where you can download the two different Yek guidelines. Let's start taking a look at these other parts of FM9 Edit. This upper part that I've been clicking in, this is referred to as the grid for obvious reasons. You've got a grid of a number of rows and a number of columns of these boxes, which you can think of as slots or cells, and each one of these slots can be filled with a model that comes with the FM9, which is called a block. You can include, models of phase shifters, wah-wah pedals, cabs, choruses, tremolo, so on and so forth. The two most important blocks that you'll find in virtually every preset are an input and an output block. Okay, the input block it contains parameters that are used to control the input, and they're associated with the actual physical input on the unit. Now, in the input block, these parameters, what they're actually controlling is a feature called a noise gate, and this enables you to control the amount of noise from your pickups that finds its way into the signal. So if you're using a guitar that has noisy pickups like P90s or single coils, you can control the threshold at which you allow noise to get into the signal. The output block has a different set of parameters that enables you to control. The typical preset is also going to have an amp block and a cab block in it. You don't have to include amp blocks or cab blocks, but in most of the built-in presets you'll find them. As long as your signal is connected all the way through from the input to the output, you're going to hear your guitar, whether there's an amp block or a cab block or not. So the amp block we've looked at a little bit. You pick an amp model, you adjust a variety of parameters on the amp block. The cab block, there's actually a little bit more ground being covered here than just selecting a particular model of cabinet, because it's the cabinet, it's the kind of speakers that are in there, and the kind of microphone that is used. All of these are encapsulated in the cab block. And really the way that the microphone was situated relative to the cabinet when this impulse response was produced, that's involved as well, and you can also simulate the proximity of the microphone or the distance with this parameter over here. Note that you can also include up to 2 different cabinets in the same cab block. Okay, use this picker to choose the particular cabinet that you want to simulate, or simulation that you want to use. You can see the Fractal comes with quite a few different cabinets built in. When you get over here to these ones that start with U, these are user defined. These are all empty spaces in memory that you can load up with IRs that you've created yourself or that you bought from a third party or obtained somewhere else. The built-in presets, by and large, were built assuming that you'd prefer to include cab blocks to emulate the sound of specific cabs and speakers. This makes sense when you plan to record direct from your FM9. It makes sense when you plan to send the FM9 output directly to a PA system when you're performing live. It also makes sense if you're going to use a full-range flat response, stage monitor of some sort to amplify the output. Then you'll want to emulate a speaker cab. But if you have a particular guitar cabinet, like your favorite 412, and you prefer to use that for amplifying the FM9, well, in that situation, you may not want to include a cab block in your preset. Or you could simply disable, and bypass the cab block that's there. So the way I just disabled this, or bypassed it, was by using the spacebar on the keyboard. That toggles the status of whether or not the block is bypassed. It works on any block, not just the cab block. You could also double click with your mouse. That does the same thing. Also, you can use the menu that you get when you right click on a block. This menu is actually used to define what's in the block. Is it a model of a flanger? Is it a drive pedal? A cabinet? An amp? What's in this block? Or you can go up here and bypass or engage a particular block. So you use that same technique. So if you are working on a given preset and you want to leave the cab block in there, you can. If you don't want to actually use it, just bypass it. Okay? As was pointed out earlier, in order for your guitar signal to pass from the input to the output block, whatever you've got in the grid in between must be connected with the line. There needs to be a contiguous line going through all of your blocks. If you don't have that line, if it's broken, then you're not going to hear any guitar signal coming out. Looking at this preset, 59 Bass Guy, we can see that these are essentially serial connections where the output of one block goes to the input of the next block. So if you look at this example here, every repeat that's produced in the delay block is going to have the rotary and the reverb applied to it. Now what if you wanted the repeats to be clean without any rotary or reverb applied to them? Well, then you'd have to find a way of routing the signal into the delay and from there directly into the output, bypassing these two guys. That's what we would call a parallel signal. And I think this is the way you'd want to do it here. Connect this to this, this to this, this over here to this, and then this to this. Now the signal is coming out of the first part of the signal chain, and it's going to the delay and to the rotary, and the signal is going in parallel from the delay to the output, and from the rotary through the reverb to the output. So as you can see, you've got 6 rows of blocks in which you can get really creative with your routing should you need to. So I already mentioned that you can assign the buttons on the floorboard to engage or bypass the individual effects in your preset. If you assigned each one of the effects in the effects block a button on the FM9, that would enable you to turn off the individual effects on and off from the floorboard. We're not going to get into how that's done in this video. I'll explain the floorboard in more detail in another video. But what if you find yourself using several effects together during certain parts of a song or in certain songs, and you'd like a way to turn multiple effects on or off simultaneously? For example, suppose that when taking a lead you want to engage the drive and the delay blocks simultaneously. That's not going to be easily done if everything's on its own button on the floor switch. Combining effects is probably the most common use for scenes, but there's another great reason for creating and using scenes, and that is changing channels. Most guitarists are familiar with the concept of multi-channel amplifiers. Most multi-channel amps come with a foot switch that enables you to switch between the different channels. So in a 3-channel amp, for example, a common application would be to set up one channel for your clean sound, another one for sort of a crunch type of sound, and then your third one for perhaps a overdriven lead sound. Take that concept and apply it to all your different amp models and effect models in the FM9. Even your input and output blocks have channels. So on your amp model, here you can see there are 4 channels over here, each of which can have different things going on in it. In your compressor, 4 channels. In your input, 4 channels, and so on. All of the blocks, I believe, have at least 4 channels. So you can employ these channels to do things like change settings on a block. You could set up the A channel in a particular block so that it produces minimal overdrive, like this. You could set up the other channels to increase the amount of gain, or to change the other settings on this particular model. The channels work the same way with all of these different blocks, by the way. You can use them to change settings. But let's take your imagination one step further. In this particular scene and in this preset, we're using the 59 baseband bright input. But what if you wanted to use the jumpered input? You could use channel B or channel C to use a different amp model altogether, which is exactly what's being done in this preset. And you can use scenes to change channels. So this is another common use for scenes. In fact, in this particular preset, 59 bass guy, scene 4 is set up so that it switches to channel C. And in channel C, we've got the 59 bass guy jumpered model rather than the bright. So we saw before that this scene, or this preset, is designed so that there's a scene that turns on the delay and the drive pedal. And now we can see that it's also being used to actually change the amp model and change the setting on that on the amp to produce more overdrive. Note that while they're using a different model, it's actually the same amp. There's no rule that says that you have to do that. You could make channel C be a 59 super lead plexi, the treble channel or the jumper channel. You could switch to an altogether different model of a different kind of amp. To summarize what we've gone through in this video, all current Fractal models employ the constructs that we've touched on. While I'm using the FM9, FM3, and the AXFX3 work the same way, and so does their editing software. Presets are used to construct virtual rigs that can include models of amps, pedals, other effects, speakers, cabs, microphones even. You can switch between presets using the interface provided on the FM9 floor modeler itself, or using the editing software, or by programming the buttons on the FM9 to do the preset changing for you. The various blocks employed in a preset comprise the signal chain. You've got a great deal of flexibility with respect to how you can organize things in your preset and how the signal flows through it. Scenes are used to capture specific configuration of the blocks employed in a preset. They're commonly used to change settings on the various blocks, to enable or bypass blocks, and to change channels on the individual blocks. In this way, scenes enable you to alter the way that the blocks in your preset are used on the fly without stopping to make changes manually. That pretty much covers it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. I do plan to record other videos on aspects of Fractal products down the road, so please check back in the future and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks again, and take care.